A pleasure to meet all at last, and today we might as well go ahead and focus on the rest of the Evil Dead films that I had planned out, since I had, after all, watched the first 3 films, the Evil Dead 1, 2, and 3. So we'll go on ahead and go on to Evil Dead 2, which of course, it came out a few years after Evil Dead Part 1 in 1987. But what this film does is that, because of a number of complicated problems that went on, especially understanding how New Line Cinema was able to be hooked on distribution of the first film, however, they did run into a problem. Sam Raimi especially made note of the fact that New Line Cinema didn't really give them the authority to use clips from Part 1 to recap for Part 2. Because what they intended to do was that the original segment of the story would have continued on after that infamous shot from the last film, which was supposedly the bicycle shot. It went from the forest through the cabin and right into Ash Williams. So basically what happened is that Evil Dead 2 at least starts off with at least half an hour worth of time spent on segments from the first film, allowing to us to experience the ending of the first film, but then continued on with Part 2. A few notable changes here is that they basically go from a group of 5 to just 2 people. They use the same car, they use the same bridge to get to the cabin, and the bridge is even torn up, looking like a giant metal claw coming out of the ground on both ends. And of course, we can't forget to mention that the Cliff Note, as they've called this, is that a number of other changes come around, with most of the parts being explained more quicker, and of course the first movie's plot and storyline going on a lot faster. So that way the second film could start off with the bicycle shot continuing on, with Ash Williams being flung to the forest, slamming into a tree, then washing himself up in a muddy puddle, then coming out to be, you guessed it, a deadite. But because the sun comes up, that apparently clears out the deadite condition in his system. He then works up the nerve to get back into the car and just rush on out of there. Noticing that the bridge is out, however, he drives all the way back to the cabin, where apparently day lasts way too short. And you'd think that for fall, the days could be a lot shorter. Well, this film just over-exaggerates that whole thing by a mile. Well, in any case, though, it's nighttime again, and Ash now essentially has to work with another full day's worth of this curse. This deadite issue that is going on inside the cabin, it apparently gets really bad by this point, because throughout the second film, at least with the original segments of the second film, we are in fact given a number of different unique pieces. They continue the film from within the cabin, but also outside in which, because as the film goes on with Ash Williams slamming himself in the head with plates, doing a front flip, and doing a lot of his own physical comedy and stunt work, which is especially phenomenal when you consider a man whom is well in his mid-20s. But in any case, though, we do get more characters. If you might remember the professor who led the expedition to uncover the Necronomicon, which was destroyed in the first film, however, the Deadite curse just wasn't through yet. Because in this case, there actually are pages missing from the book that could actually clear up the issue. We find out with the professor's daughter, as well as a few others, that venture to the cabin, but upon realizing the bridge is out, they actually work up a trade to find an alternate route. So, you could say that they were really looking forward to heading back into the cabin and trying to figure out how to undo this travesty. Meanwhile, Ash is still back there, now free of one hand, as, well, he got bit in it. The hand becomes possessed, he ends up tearing it off with the chainsaw. And you could say that the chainsaw thing that he does is a lot more prominent in Evil Dead 2. Compared to the first film, which we didn't really get a single groovy in it. But of course, when Ash eventually works up the courage to forget about the hand that's now left behind and wandering all over the house, well, he goes into the work shed and then equips the chainsaw hand. That, of course, is when we get our trademark groovy. Of Quite a simple but still effective catchphrase from him. On top of all that, once the others eventually might make their way inside, Ash is not only armed to the teeth with the chainsaw and the boomstick, but a laughing fest occurs, as a lot of things just come to life and possessed. Start laughing up with him, causing him to laugh. It almost makes it seem like it's becoming a Joker-esque sort of thing, when his laughing gas is spilled in the cabin and everything just starts laughing almost to death. But when the others do arrive, it's pretty bad. At first, Ash Williams thinks that there was something outside that causes him to fire his boomstick, which is now essentially a sawn-off shotgun as opposed to it having the full barrel from the other film. But, as you probably know by now, this issue with Ash Williams is that he didn't realize other people were coming for the cabin. This is what, of course, led to an enraged moment or two. But upon being kicked out in the cellar as punishment, the tape on the recorder does clarify that the professor's wife, Henrietta, apparently was possessed and tried to kill him. He locked her down in the cellar as a response to that. But here's one unique thing. The practical effects that they did on Henrietta was mostly a full-body latex outfit that was actually worn by a crew member. A relative of Sam Raimi had actually donned this unique costume on set, which I really will say. The gross-sitting effects of the blood and black bile is one thing, and of course the gore of Ash sawing off his own hand, or many other things that take place. There's a lot more gore in this film, yet at the same time though, in an effort to try and get them on a more R-rated standpoint for 1987, compared to that of what they did for the first film, in which New Line Cinema, despite distributions of this whole thing, we had unrated films for Evil Dead 1 and 2. So that already is pretty gruesome. The fact that Evil Dead 1 and 2 were able to go through more horror and comedic type elements, but with a lot of gore added in, you know you're going somewhere. Anyways though, a number of things start to take place from here on out. The pages of the book are put down there, and one of the guys, known as Jake, he tosses the pages down there and takes them pretty much like a hostage standpoint. That's because his gal was lost in the woods, and they need to help him find her. But what eventually happens is that they rush back inside, and while Jake follows them, a surprise dagger stab to the gut almost puts Jake out of commission for good. But it somehow becomes even more gruesome later on. Because while some of the other characters end up dead or possessed, we do get to see ourselves a final girl alongside Ash Williams, whom was in fact the one and only daughter of the professor. Yeah, she comes around again to recite the words in the missing pages. And upon only partially doing so, summons a massive Kandarian demon, whom is somehow able to transform Ash's hair color. I don't know how that works. But of course, even though Ash does try to put up a good fight against it, the missing pages are still uttered, as she, in fact, is stabbed in the back by the dagger by Ash's former hands. Yeah, kind of out of nowhere, but it still does the effort to put her down for good. Right before it happens though, she says the last words of the missing pages, allowing a wormhole to be opened, and everything, including the cabin, the car, and Ash himself, are all transported to medieval times. The year 1300 AD, pretty much the height of the Dark Ages. But while many of the knights, merlins, and horse-drawn carriages full of supplies and stuff are all roaming around, clamoring around this newcomer, a foreigner pretty much. Even the car is seen as a bit of a strange contraption to them. But a heartbeat comes down, and Ash is able to pull off one massive shot with a boomstick to destroy it. This apparently earns him the respect, and he's simply known as the hero of the sky. He has come to save them from the terrors of the Deadites. At least that's what one knight proclaims him to be. But it still is insane nonetheless. Imagine one shot to a creature and you get cheered on by everybody. Man, Can't say I haven't had that experience before. Still though, I might as well just say right away though, things will be different in Evil Dead 3 for a number of different reasons. So, Evil Dead 2, however, still is an impressively well-made film. The comedic elements really add a lot of new flavor to the equation, and I'm more than happy to make this one of the best sequels I might have ever reviewed, or even watched for that matter. But I feel like it truly peaks when Evil Dead 3 Army of Darkness shows up. So, I'll give Evil Dead 2 a good 8.5 out of 10.1, and I'll be back with Evil Dead 3 soon enough.